Britt, tell me just a little bit, just to kind of set the scene here. What is the real estate market like in Maine right now, from your perspective?
The real estate market in Maine is hot, and that's hard for buyers, good for sellers right now. It was already a strong market, and the pandemic seems to have only made it even more competitive. People from everywhere around the country seem to be seeing Maine as their new COVID retreat, COVID toy, place they want to be.
Gotcha. What's been the advantages and disadvantages there? Obviously, for sellers, lots of competitive offers, I would assume, but and then buyers, there must be other challenges. So I'll let you explain what those are.
Yeah, it's really a tale of two cities right now. If you're a seller, you are in the driver's seat, and your property value has probably gone up 20% or more in the last year or two. It's just stunning. If you're a buyer, it's hard. There's just no denying that. We're seeing 10, 20, 30, and even 40 offers on single listings out there. So that's just tough for a buyer. The price goes up and the terms are really challenging to compete with. We're seeing cash offers, and a lot of buyers are waiving building inspections. So it's hard, particularly for a first-time buyer, somebody who's got a house to sell or is using traditional financing the way most of us would buy a house. It's hard for them to get in the game right now.
20 to 30 offers on a single house. I mean, how does that compare to some of the other hottest markets that you've seen?
I've never seen anything like this in 15 years. We've been through a couple ups and downs in pretty strong markets, but this is just staggering. And it's particular slots of the market. It's not everywhere. And so a savvy buyer who could be flexible can maybe get outside of some of the more concentrated areas or be willing to accept maybe some compromises with a property or location that other buyers are not willing to accept. But if you're in the sweet spot, it's tough.
How competitive are we talking when we're talking about these cash offers? I mean, what's the, I guess I have it's a two-part question, right? What's the average that you're seeing for the, price that the home finally sells for? And what's the craziest one you've seen so far?
It's all kind of relative to the starting price. So if you're at a $300,000 listing, maybe offers are 30 or 40 over, but we've seen properties priced at $1 million and go for a couple $100,000 over that. So it really is a range, and seems to be plenty of wealth out there. If you've got a buyer who's coming from one of the other big cities, New York, Brooklyn, DC, Boston, and they've sold their house there, they've got ample funds. If they want to be in Maine, they're going to make it work, and they're going to bring a strong offer and stuff to compete with.
Offers at more than 10% of the asking price. I mean, again, if you can help put that in perspective, how does that compare to other hot times in the market?
Well, to use the overworn word, it's unprecedented. As any history I've seen, 20% over the asking price, going over by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these prices are high to start with. We're seeing houses that traditionally would have been $650,000, maybe $750,000, get listed for $1 million and then sell for 100 or 200 over that. It's hard to know where the ground is in some places. Where is the floor of value? And brokers are struggling. Buyers need to remember that list price is just a made-up number. As brokers, we're guessing too. There's no clear math. There's no matrix or calculator we have that says what the market price is. And it feels like the ground shifting below our feet every day as we see new offers come in and a house down the road sell for a price that we hadn't imagined before. We have to keep adjusting our own mental model of where the market is.
So generally speaking, what do buyers need to do in order to be competitive? We talked about cash offers and we talked about waiving contingencies.
Those are the two big ones. When you're putting an offer together, you've got the price and you've got the terms. So the price is number one. We all know about that. But then there's how are you going to finance it? Is your offer contingent on something else happening? Is it contingent on the sale of a house? Is it contingent on you getting a loan? If it's contingent on you getting a loan, well, what if the property doesn't appraise for the price you're willing to pay? And that can be a challenge in this market where prices are going up and up. Sometimes the appraised values don't keep up with the price a buyer is willing to pay. So that's sort of a nuanced piece we could dive into a little more. Or you're just paying cash and there is nothing to prevent you from purchasing the property from a financing perspective.
Generally speaking, we don't have to get into numbers or anything, but are you seeing more cash offers?
we're seeing many more cash offers, and in many cases, it's the cash offer that takes the deal. We've seen some very high prices and with good financing, but if there's cash on the table, it just feels like more of a done deal. And the sellers need to remember, at the closing, they get cash. It doesn't really matter how the cash got there. So if they're confident in the financing structure, or maybe it's not contingent on financing, the seller should feel comfortable that at the end of the day, they're going to get a check for the value of the property.
Gotcha. Let's go back to the home inspections portions of things, because that was something you and I had talked about a little bit on the phone. How much does that play a role in somebody's competitiveness to be considered for their offer if they say, hey, we'll waive the home inspection?
The ability to waive a building inspection, or what I think of as the due diligence period during the home buying process, is key, because the way the standard purchase and sale form is written for Maine realtors is that that is a wide open contingency. It means that if the buyer has a building inspection clause, they are not obligated to purchase that property at all. Usually for the first week or two, they've got a free look. So they just beat out 20 offers, and then they can take their time, go through the property, do all the normal things that frankly all buyers want to do when looking to buy a property. But if one of the competing offers does not have that contingency, they're really committing to the purchase. They're not telling the seller, you need to wait a couple of weeks while I go look at it and see if I really want to buy it, see if there's anything I'm concerned about. They've made a commitment to say, here's my earnest deposit check, I'll see you at the closing. So to waive an inspection and have a cash offer is really the gold standard. It basically means I'll see you at the closing. You don't need to think about this again. And those are hard to compete with.
So there's definitely an advantage to doing that, because you make yourself much more competitive, much more, you increase your offer's competitiveness.
It's just a more attractive offer to the seller. But to do that, you are taking on more risk. And so there's a lot of ways to take on risk. Paying a high price is risk, that maybe the values will go down and you will have overpaid. Also, buying a property where you didn't take your time to really do an inspection has some risk. Maybe you're not sure what you're getting. Maybe there are some hidden problems there that you don't have the opportunity to discover because you have waived your time to look a little closer at the property.
Gotcha. I mean, when you talk to your clients, what do you tell them about waiving the inspection and the risk there? I mean, how much of a risk is it when you're talking about maybe something like a mold problem or a foundation problem or a basement flooding problem?
As brokers, on the one hand, we never want to tell our clients to waive a building inspection. Could be a lot of risk for our clients, and also could kind of come back on us. If they discover something went wrong, they come say, hey, you said I didn't need to do a building inspection. So we're sort of reluctant to do that. But in this market, it's also our responsibility to tell buyers what's going on in the market and what their options are. And so we are telling them, look, this is an option. And it's possible that other buyers who are going to be making an offer on the same property you want will waive their building inspection. Do you want to do that? And so without pushing, we need to make sure they know that that's an option, and that would strengthen their offer. It's really an advantage if you've got a buyer who is a builder, knows what they're looking at with the building. Although COVID showings have a lot of restrictions on the number of people who can come through a building, if you can bring a friend who's a builder, if you can bring a building inspector and have those eyes on the property as you're walking through and just seeing it for the first time, maybe that buyer can get to the point where they're comfortable waiving a building inspection. Maybe they saw enough to know that it's okay.
Gotcha. So let's kind of dial back here, kind of go to the opposite side of things. We've talked about what makes the offer competitive, but obviously buyers want to have, there are many buyers out there, potentially first-time buyers or something like that, who might want to have that security of, look, I've had somebody who is a professional, has looked at this, has inspected it. The state of Maine does not regulate home inspectors or inspections. What's your thought on that? Is that a good thing for the buyer? Is that a bad thing for the buyer? I mean, how does this all shake out? Because there are so many components to that.
It's important for buyers to understand what a general building inspection is and what it is not. The general building inspection is just that. It's a general look at the property. It's an overview of the systems and the main features of a property that an inspector can see. What it is not is a specialist going through and looking at your particular systems, and it is not a guarantee that they will find everything, and that once you have an inspection, you know that there will be no future problems with your house. Knowing that, buyers should decide whether they need a general inspection. General inspections are great to see, in my opinion, if there's a deal breaker with that property. And the way I like to say it is, if the building inspector discovers something that was significant enough that had the buyer known it before making their offer, they would have made a different offer. That something fundamental has changed about the value of that property. That's important. The second thing you're getting from a building inspection is sort of just a checklist. You're going to be a homeowner. You're going to own that property. It's great to learn all the little nuances and maybe things to put on your to-do list. But particularly in this market, you're not going to go back to the seller and request just the little things for the most part. You're not going to go back and say, oh, fix this one outlet and tighten the faucet. Those are home ownership issues. Get a building inspection if you're afraid there's going to be a deal breaker, if the foundation is failing, if the roof is really at the end of its life. Those are big issues. Those are issues that could be tens of thousands of dollars that you want to know about before you enter, or close on that property.
Gotcha.
Can I just add on to that a little bit?
Yes, please.
In some cases, a buyer can see that the house is generally in good shape, but they may have one specific concern. Maybe the heating system is old, or maybe that roof does need to be looked at a little more closely. In that situation, I'd encourage buyers to maybe or maybe not waive the general building inspection, but maybe have a specialist come in. You can tell the house is basically fine, but let's get someone to inspect that boiler a little closer, or get up on that roof and see what he can see. Go in the attic and see if there's mold there, something that's a more specific concern. And so many times we default to the general inspection, but we're not really going to learn anything from the general inspection. We can see that the house is basically fine. In some cases, it makes sense to bring in a specialist and look at a system or two that gives you concern and would be a big dollar item. You should sort of check that off the worry list and decide if that's okay or not.
Gotcha. Have you ever heard of a situation where a seller or a broker or agency might require a home inspection by a specific company?
I don't think I've seen that.
Okay.
It probably has happened.
Sure.
Occasionally we see banks, if it's a more local bank or in a commercial deal, potentially your financing might require that you get a building inspection. They want to see that. That's relatively rare, but it does happen.
Okay, but they're not saying, you've got to use, Jim's home inspection in Gorham or something like that. I don't know. Maybe not.
I haven't seen it. Again, it's probably happened, but it's not a standard part of our market or the way things work.
Gotcha. I mean, there's as far as I understand from the state's perspective, from just some emails back and forth with them, there really is there's no like warranty on an inspection, right? I mean, if the inspector misses something, that is a deal breaker, what happens?
People miss things all the time. And anytime you hire a professional, in most situations, many professionals, if they make a mistake, they make a mistake. Your lawyer can miss something. You don't get to go sue your lawyer. I mean, you can sue anyone, but generally speaking, if your doctor misses something, they just miss something. You can bring a lawsuit, but I would really encourage buyers to talk to their inspector. The building inspectors are really good at explaining what they can do and what they're not going to do, what the building inspection is and what it isn't. And based on that information, the buyer should decide if that's good enough for them and if that's what they want. Because you're right, it's not a guarantee. They're human. They're not opening up the walls. They can't see through the foundations. They're not engineers in most cases. They're walking through the building for a few hours and they're telling you what they see, but it's not a guarantee.
So one kind of like whatever question, and then I want to follow up on something else. But is there a difference between a home inspector and then one of them that's nationally certified in your mind as an agent?
I personally don't put a lot of weight on the certifications, not because they're not a good thing. You learn that different inspectors have different strengths, and many of them come from different backgrounds. A building inspector who's been a builder is a great inspector in many cases. A building inspector who's worked on old homes is helpful when your buyer is buying an old home. They just understand how they work, and the way they talk and go through the property shows that they have the context to understand what they're looking at. A lot of classes, all those things are great, but those tend to be things around regulations and code, again, which are important, but don't necessarily teach people sort of what you'll learn on the ground when building a house, spending a lot of time in houses, seeing all the different products, the different types of roofing materials and heating systems. There's so many different things out there. And I personally feel comfortable with someone who you just know has been in a lot of houses, maybe had to work on the systems, fix systems. They really have sort of been in the weeds on these things and can give you the perspective that you're going to want as a homeowner.
Gotcha. And then, so to kind of go back to the last thing, and this is something that you and I had talked about on the phone, and this is pretty much my last question. We had talked about the fact that the state does not regulate home inspectors or inspections. Do you think that there needs to be more regulation to protect consumers?
Do I personally think that?
I mean, your opinion as a professional in the industry.
My personal perspective is that I don't think we need more regulations. I can tell you even in the financing, the more regulations we got after 2008, the more confused things got and the harder it is to get a loan. So, again, this is my personal bias, but a lot of times more regulation and guidelines don't actually help you. I think you want, buyers want to get an inspector who knows houses and knows what they're doing to explain to the buyer what they know, what they don't know, and to go through and share that information with the buyer. All the guarantees, all the regulations, none of this is going to make 100% guarantee. I like to say when you leave your house in the morning, you take risk. When you buy a house, you're taking on some risk. You do your due diligence the best you can, but there's going to be some amount of risk. You're buying a big building, and it may have been perfect up to that point, and then a storm comes along next week and blows the shingles off the roof, and you have a roof leak. This happened on one of my properties last week, and now I need a new roof. It just happens, and that's part of home ownership. So I think part of buying a home, do your homework, make sure you surround yourself with a good team of professionals, from the broker to the financing, your lender, and a good building inspector, and then move forward and just do the best you can and take the information the team gives you to make good decisions.
Brit, you have been fantastic. You are so good at giving clear answers that are concise that people can understand. I guess the last question I have to wrap up is, how long do you think this market is going to remain the way that it is? And I know that's asking you to look into your crystal ball a little bit, but do you have any idea?
I do an annual report on the market in southern Maine, and all signs showed that it had been leveling out a year ago after about 5 years of pretty dramatic increases. So we're all just kind of shocked that we've spiked up again. It both seems like it can't go forever because it is just so frothy right now. And at the same time, it's hard to see why it would slow down. We're still not building a lot of houses. Construction costs are high, and the demand is high. The demand was high in Maine even before we had this influx from out of state. And with this added pressure from people from all over the country wanting to make Maine their home, it's really creating a lot of pressure on the real estate market. So it's a challenge. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated as a buyer, but also realize that as sellers, as homeowners, people's values have gone up significantly. And if there's some reason that owners are going to make a change in their life in the next few years, it's worth talking to their agent to see if there's value in their home they can refinance, or if they're thinking about making a move in the next 5 years and retiring and going to Florida, maybe capitalize on this market. If we're in a bubble, sellers should be aware of that. And if we're in a bubble, buyers, I just don't know what to tell them. I thought we were in a bubble a couple of years ago and prices have only gone up. So my crystal ball is still in the mail. I'll let you know when it arrives. Until then, we're all just show up every day and do the best we can.
Brit, I appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you for being so flexible with me and being patient and answering all of my questions. Is there anything we didn't cover?
To talk. I love this stuff. I just love geeking out on this stuff. So anytime you got some real estate, even just a background for a story or something you're thinking about, don't hesitate. We can just knock some ideas around, and if there's something there, great. And if there's not, there's not. But
I love it. Thank you, Brit. I appreciate it. Is anything we didn't cover that you think that I really left like a stone unturned?
No, I mean, I think we did good stuff with inspections. I mean, I know you're sort of looking into the regulation stuff. It's just my personal opinion. I'm just kind of anti-regulation as a general statement. So that's why when you asked that question, I just kind of stopped. I was like, look, I know I think about regulations in most things. but that's an avenue to go. And
I think this just it's important, as we do any story, to make sure we have a diversity of ideas. There may be some people who say, yeah, they got to be regulated, and for you, you've got a reason why they shouldn't. And I think that should be put on the table so that whoever watches the story can make their own judgment.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thanks, Brit. I appreciate it. And anything else you need, just hit me up with a text, okay?
Okay. Yeah, you're in my phone now. I got you. So you're gonna run this. Any thoughts when?
Let's see. I could tell you the air date is scheduled for April 22.
Oh wow. Okay. This is just like a general story.
It's a deep dive. So yeah.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
I'll keep you in the loop.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great
Thanks.
to see you.
Take care.